The history of slavery in America is marked by countless atrocities, but one of the most disturbing aspects is the practice of slave breeding. This practice involved the forced reproduction of enslaved people to increase the labor force, often under the most brutal and inhumane conditions. Slave breeding was not only a violation of human rights, but also a testament to the depths of cruelty that characterized the institution of slavery. The practice of slave breeding was primarily driven by economic incentives. The transatlantic slave trade was banned in the United States in 1808, which increased the demand for domestic slave labor. Plantation owners turned to slave breeding as a cost-effective solution to increase their workforce. Enslaved women were seen as valuable commodities, not just for their labor, but for their ability to produce future laborers. This dehumanizing perspective reduced people to mere assets in the brutal economy of slavery. One of the most horrific aspects of slave breeding was the systematic rape of enslaved women. These women had no autonomy over their bodies and were often forced to bear children against their will. Slaveholders, overseers, and other enslaved men chosen by the owners would rape women to ensure pregnancies. This institutionalized sexual violence was a deliberate strategy to increase the slave population, with no regard for the physical and psychological trauma inflicted on the victims. Slave breeding often resulted in the tragic separation of families. Children born to enslaved women were seen as additional labor units that could be sold or traded. It was common for children to be taken from their mothers at a young age and sold to different plantations, tearing families apart. This practice not only provided a steady supply of slaves, but also aimed to weaken family bonds and reduce the likelihood of organized resistance among the enslaved population. The legal framework of slavery in America reinforced the practice of slave breeding. Laws were enacted to ensure that children born to enslaved women inherited their mother's status, thus becoming the property of the slaveholder. This legal principle, known as partus sequitur rem, entrenched the generational nature of slavery. It allowed slaveholders to perpetuate the institution of slavery and maintain a steady supply of enslaved people through reproduction. Despite the overwhelming brutality, enslaved people found ways to resist and survive. Acts of resistance included covert practices like contraception, abortions, and even escape attempts. Enslaved women often formed support networks to protect each other and their children. These acts of defiance and solidarity were crucial in maintaining a sense of humanity and community amid the dehumanizing conditions of slavery.